Sarah Martinez stared at the rejection letter in her hands, the words blurring through her tears. The United States Navy SEALs had turned her down again. This was her third attempt, and each rejection felt like a punch to her stomach. She crumpled the paper and threw it across her small apartment, watching it bounce off the wall and land next to two other rejection letters from previous years. The 26-year-old former Marine sat on her couch, her athletic frame trembling with frustration. She had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, earned multiple commendations for bravery, and completed advanced combat training that would make most men quit. Yet here she was, being told once again that she wasn't suitable for the elite Special Operations Unit. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from her younger brother Jake. "How did it go, sis?" She stared at the message for several minutes before typing back. "Same as before." They said no. Within minutes, her phone was ringing. Jake's concerned voice filled the quiet apartment. "Sarah, I'm sorry, but maybe this is a sign that you should try something else. You're already a war hero. You don't need to prove anything to anyone." "You don't understand," Sarah replied, her voice cracking. "This isn't about proving anything to other people. This is about proving something to myself. Every night, I wake up thinking about the mission where my team got ambushed. 3 good soldiers died because we didn't have proper backup. If there had been SEALs with us that day..." Jake was quiet for a moment. He knew this story well. Sarah had survived the attack, but the guilt ate at her every day. She believed that joining the SEALs would somehow honor her fallen comrades and prevent other families from experiencing the same loss. "The recruiter told me that women just aren't built for the physical and mental demands," Sarah continued. "He said I should consider other career paths within the military or maybe civilian work. Can you believe that? After everything I've accomplished, he basically told me to give up my dreams because I'm a woman." The apartment felt smaller that evening as Sarah paced back and forth, replaying every conversation with the SEAL recruiters. She had trained harder than any candidate she knew. She could run a 6-minute mile, complete 200 push-ups without stopping, and hold her breath underwater for over 3 minutes. Her marksmanship scores were consistently in the top 5%, and her tactical knowledge was exceptional. But none of that seemed to matter. Sarah walked to her bathroom mirror and stared at her reflection. The scar above her left eyebrow from the Afghanistan ambush seemed to mock her. Her dark eyes, usually filled with determination, now looked tired and defeated. She had always been the person others looked up to for strength and perseverance. Tonight, she felt like she had nothing left to give. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chun, knocked on the door around 9 o'clock. The elderly woman had been like a grandmother to Sarah since she moved into the apartment complex 2 years ago. "I heard you crying through the walls, dear," Mrs. Chun said softly as Sarah opened the door. "Come, let me make you some tea." They sat together in Mrs. Chin's small kitchen, surrounded by the smell of jasmine tea and homemade cookies. The older woman listened patiently as Sarah explained her situation for the 4th time that day. "You know, Mrs. Chin said finally, my late husband was a military man too. He used to tell me that the strongest people aren't those who never fall down, but those who get back up every time they fall. He said that real warriors aren't made by their victories, but by how they handle their defeats." Sarah looked up from her teacup. "But what if I keep getting knocked down? What if I'm just not good enough, and everyone else can see it except me?" Mrs. Chun reached across the table and took Sarah's hands in her wrinkled ones. "Child, I've watched you train every morning at 5 a.m. for 2 years. I've seen you push yourself beyond what most people think is possible. The question isn't whether you're good enough. The question is whether you're going to let other people's limitations become your own." That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Mrs. Chin's words and about the 3 soldiers who had died in Afghanistan. She remembered their families at the memorial service, how their children looked so lost and confused. She thought about all the other military families who might face similar tragedies if special operations units weren't as strong and skilled as they could be. Around 3 in the morning, Sarah got out of bed and pulled out her laptop. She started researching every person who had ever been rejected from an elite military unit, but eventually succeeded in their goals. She read about athletes who were cut from teams, but later became champions. She studied the stories of astronauts who were rejected multiple times before finally making it to space. What she discovered surprised her. Almost every person she read about had faced multiple rejections before achieving their dreams. The common thread wasn't that they were naturally more talented than others, but that they refused to accept other people's judgments as the final word on their capabilities. As the sun began to rise, Sarah realized something important. She had been approaching this challenge the wrong way. She had been trying to convince the SEALs to accept her based on their standards and their timeline. What if instead, she focused on becoming so undeniably qualified that they would have no choice but to recognize her abilities? Sarah stood up from her laptop and walked to her window, watching the sunrise paint the sky in brilliant colors. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope returning to her chest. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. She grabbed a notebook and started writing down a plan. If the SEALs wanted candidates who were stronger, faster, and mentally tougher than anyone they had ever seen, then that's exactly what she would become. She would train like no one had trained before. She would study every aspect of special operations until she knew more about it than some of the instructors. The rejection letters on her floor suddenly looked different to her. They weren't evidence of her failure. They were simply the first chapters of a much longer story. Sarah's phone rang again. This time it was her former commanding officer, Colonel Williams, who had heard about her latest rejection through the military grapevine. "Martinez, I know you're disappointed, but I want you to know that some of us are watching your journey with great interest," he said. "What you're attempting to do could change everything for future generations of women in the military. That's a heavy responsibility, but I believe you're strong enough to carry it." "Thank you, sir," Sarah replied, her voice steady for the first time all day. "I'm not giving up. I'm just getting started." After hanging up, Sarah looked around her apartment with new eyes. The cramped space that had felt like a prison the night before now felt like a launching pad. She had work to do, and she was going to need every advantage she could get. She picked up the 3 rejection letters from the floor and smoothed them out carefully. Instead of throwing them away, she pinned them to her bulletin board. They would serve as daily reminders of what she was fighting for and why she couldn't afford to quit. The path ahead would be longer and more difficult than she had initially imagined. But Sarah Martinez was done letting other people define what was possible for her life. The SEALs might not be ready for her yet, but she was going to make sure she was ready for them. 6 months after her 3rd rejection, Sarah Martinez was unrecognizable from the defeated woman who had cried in her apartment. She stood on the beach at 4:30 in the morning, salt spray hitting her face as she prepared for another punishing training session. Her body had changed dramatically. Her muscles were more defined, her endurance had doubled, and her mental toughness had reached levels she never knew were possible. The transformation hadn't been easy. Sarah had quit her comfortable desk job at the Veterans Administration and taken a part-time position at a local gym, which gave her access to professional-grade equipment and training facilities. Every spare moment was devoted to becoming the perfect candidate. Her daily routine would intimidate most professional athletes. She woke up at 4 a.m. for a 2-hour swim in the ocean, regardless of weather conditions. The cold Pacific waters in winter nearly stopped her heart some mornings, but she pushed through the pain. After swimming, she ran 10 miles on the beach, her feet pounding against the sand until her legs screamed for mercy. "Most people think physical training is about building muscle," Sarah explained to Dr. Rebecca Torres, a sports psychologist she had hired to help with the mental aspects of her preparation. "But what I've learned is that it's really about building the part of your mind that refuses to quit when your body wants to give up." Dr. Torres had been skeptical when Sarah first approached her. She had worked with Olympic athletes and Navy SEALs, and she understood the unique psychological demands of elite performance. Sarah's plan seemed almost impossibly ambitious. "What Sarah is attempting goes beyond normal athletic preparation," Dr. Torres noted during one of their sessions. "She's essentially trying to rebuild her entire identity around a goal that most people would have abandoned after the first rejection. It requires a level of mental discipline that borders on obsessive." Sarah's training wasn't just physical. She enrolled in advanced courses in military strategy, counterterrorism tactics, and combat medicine. She spent evenings studying foreign languages, focusing on Arabic and Pashto, knowing that linguistic skills were valuable in special operations. Her apartment became a library of military manuals, fitness guides, and psychological preparation books. The social costs were significant. Sarah's college friends stopped inviting her to parties and social events when she repeatedly declined. Dating became impossible with her rigid schedule. Even family gatherings felt foreign to her now, as her relatives struggled to understand her single-minded pursuit of what they saw as an impossible dream. "I started to worry that she was losing herself," her brother Jake later admitted. "When I visited her apartment, it looked like a military bunker. She had charts on the walls tracking her performance in dozens of different categories. She measured everything: her heart rate, her reaction times, how many hours she slept, what she ate. It was like she had turned herself into a science experiment." The loneliness was the hardest part. Sarah would lie awake at night, exhausted from training but unable to turn off her mind. She questioned whether she was becoming obsessed in an unhealthy way. Sometimes she wondered if everyone else was right, and she should accept that some dreams simply weren't meant to be. The turning point came during a particularly brutal training session in month 8 of her preparation. Sarah had convinced a local CrossFit gym to let her use their facilities during off hours in exchange for cleaning services. She was attempting to complete a workout that she had designed to exceed SEAL training standards when her body finally gave out. She collapsed during a set of burpees, her vision blurring and her heart racing dangerously fast. For several minutes, she lay on the gym floor, unable to move and wondering if she had pushed herself too far. Tom Rodriguez, the gym owner who had arrived early that morning, found her there. "Sarah, this is insane," he said, helping her to a sitting position. "I've been watching you train here for months, and you're going to seriously hurt yourself. No goal is worth destroying your health." Tom was a former Army Ranger who understood the military mindset, but even he was concerned about Sarah's intensity. "You want to know what I think?" Tom continued. "I think you're training like someone who's trying to punish herself for something. Real warriors train smart, not just hard. They understand that sustainable excellence is more valuable than impressive crashes." His words hit Sarah harder than any physical workout ever had. That evening, she called Dr. Torres for an emergency session. "Tom might be right," Sarah admitted during their video call. "Maybe I have been trying to punish myself. Ever since Afghanistan, I've felt like I need to suffer in order to earn the right to succeed. Like if I don't push myself to the breaking point every day, I'm dishonoring the soldiers who died." Dr. Torres leaned forward in her chair. "Sarah, honoring fallen soldiers doesn't require you to destroy yourself. In fact, the opposite is true. The best way to honor them is to become the most effective, capable person you can be. That requires taking care of your body and mind, not breaking them." This conversation marked a crucial shift in Sarah's approach. She maintained her intense training schedule, but began incorporating proper recovery periods, better nutrition, and stress management techniques. She learned to listen to her body's signals and adjust her workouts accordingly. More importantly, she started connecting with other people who shared similar goals. Through online forums and local military communities, she met veterans who were pursuing their own seemingly impossible dreams. She discovered that she wasn't alone in her struggles. Maria Santos, a former Air Force pilot who was training to become an astronaut, became one of Sarah's closest allies during this period. The two women would meet every Sunday morning for long runs along the coast, sharing their frustrations and celebrating small victories. "What I learned from Sarah," Maria later said, "was that the difference between someone who achieves an impossible goal and someone who gives up isn't talent or luck. It's the ability to keep adjusting your approach until you find what works." Sarah tried dozens of different training methods, nutrition plans, and mental preparation techniques. Most people would have stuck with one approach and given up when it didn't work perfectly. As Sarah's first year of intensive preparation neared its end, her performance metrics were extraordinary. She could run 15 miles without stopping, complete 300 push-ups in a row, and hold her breath underwater for nearly 5 minutes. Her tactical knowledge exceeded that of many active-duty special operations personnel. But the most significant change wasn't physical or intellectual. Sarah had developed an unshakable confidence in her ability to overcome obstacles. The woman who had cried over rejection letters had been replaced by someone who viewed challenges as puzzles to solve rather than barriers to her success. Her apartment still looked like a military command center, but Now it also included photos of the people who were supporting her journey. Pictures of Mrs. Chun, Maria, Tom, Dr. Torres, and others reminded her that she wasn't fighting this battle alone. The anniversary of her third rejection arrived on a Tuesday morning. Sarah marked the date by completing a workout that would have been impossible for her a year earlier. As she cooled down on the beach, watching the sunrise over the Pacific Ocean, she realized something profound had changed inside her. She was no longer the person who needed the SEALs to validate her worth. She had become someone who could contribute value to any organization, military or civilian. The rejection letters that had once devastated her now seemed like gifts that had forced her to become stronger than she ever imagined possible. Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number for the SEAL recruiting office. Her finger hovered over the call button for several seconds. This time would be different. This time, she wasn't going to ask for acceptance. She was going to demonstrate why they needed her more than she needed them. The fourth time Sarah Martinez walked into the SEAL recruiting office, she carried herself differently. Gone was the desperate energy of someone begging for acceptance. In its place was the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what they brought to the table. Commander Patricia Hayes, the new recruiting officer, had heard about Sarah through the military grapevine. Stories of the former Marine who had spent 18 months transforming herself into a superhuman candidate had spread throughout the special operations community. Ms. Martinez, Commander Hayes said, looking up from Sarah's file. Your persistence is legendary around here. But I have to ask, why put yourself through all this? There are plenty of other ways to serve your country that don't require this level of sacrifice. Sarah sat perfectly straight in her chair, her hands folded calmly in her lap. Commander, with respect, I'm not here to serve my country in just any way. I'm here to serve in the most effective way possible. Over the past 18 months, I've proven to myself and others that I can exceed every standard you've set. Now I want the opportunity to prove it to you. The interview process was different this time. Instead of focusing on Sarah's previous military experience, Commander Hayes was interested in her transformation journey. She asked detailed questions about Sarah's training methods, her mental preparation techniques, and her motivation for continuing despite multiple rejections. What impressed me most, Commander Hayes later recalled, wasn't Sarah's physical capabilities, though those were remarkable. It was her analytical approach to improvement. She had studied every aspect of SEAL training and had developed innovative solutions to challenges that our current candidates struggled with. She wasn't just trying to meet our standards, she was pushing beyond them. The real test came 2 weeks later when Sarah was invited to participate in an unofficial assessment alongside current SEAL candidates. This wasn't part of the standard recruitment process, but Commander Hayes wanted to see how Sarah performed in a group setting. The assessment took place over a weekend at a military training facility in Southern California. Sarah found herself among 12 male candidates, all of whom were already partway through the SEAL pipeline. The atmosphere was tense and competitive. When Sarah showed up that first morning, remembered Lieutenant James Morrison, one of the instructors, you could feel the skepticism in the room. These guys had been training for months, and here was an outsider who thought she could keep up with them. The attitude was basically, let's show her what real special operations training looks like. The weekend began with a physical fitness assessment that included swimming, running, push-ups, pull-ups, and sit-ups. Sarah not only completed every event successfully, but finished first or second in most categories. The male candidate's skepticism began to shift to grudging respect. But the physical tests were just the beginning. The weekend included tactical planning exercises, navigation challenges, and team-building scenarios designed to test leadership skills and decision-making under pressure. During a complex rescue simulation, Sarah was assigned to a team led by Marcus Thompson, a candidate who had initially been most vocal about his doubts regarding her abilities. The scenario involved extracting a hostage from a building while under simulated enemy fire. I'll be honest, Marcus later admitted. I was ready to dislike Sarah. I thought she was trying to make some kind of political statement about women in combat. But during that rescue exercise, she saved our entire mission. The team had become pinned down by simulated enemy fire and was running out of time to complete the rescue. Traditional approaches weren't working, and the instructors were clearly waiting to see how the group would adapt to the changing situation. Sarah studied the layout of the training facility and noticed something others had missed. There was a drainage tunnel that ran underneath the building, not part of the official scenario, but available for creative problem-solving. She proposed a plan that would allow 2 team members to approach the hostage location from below while the others provided a distraction. It was brilliant, Marcus continued. Not only did Sarah see an opportunity that the rest of us missed, but she presented her idea in a way that made it seem like a team decision rather than trying to take credit for herself. That's real leadership. The plan worked perfectly. Sarah's team completed the rescue simulation faster than any group in the exercise's history. More importantly, they did it without losing any team members to simulated enemy fire. Lieutenant Morrison pulled Sarah aside after the exercise. "Martinez, where did you learn to think like that?" "That was special operations level tactical thinking. Sir, I've spent the last year studying every manual, watching every training video, and analyzing every successful mission I could find," Sarah replied. "But the real learning happened when I stopped trying to copy what everyone else was doing and started thinking about how to do it better." The weekend's final challenge was a psychological assessment designed to test candidates' ability to function under extreme stress. Each person was isolated in a small, windowless room and subjected to various forms of mental pressure, including loud noises, bright lights, and difficult problem-solving tasks. Most candidates showed signs of stress within the first hour. Some became agitated, others withdrew mentally. Sarah approached the challenge differently. She used meditation techniques she had learned during her 18-month preparation period to maintain focus and clarity throughout the entire 8-hour ordeal. "What we saw from Sarah during that stress test was unlike anything in my 15 years of conducting these assessments," said Dr. Michael Chun, the military psychologist who oversaw the exercise. "She didn't just endure the stress, she seemed to thrive under it. Her problem-solving actually improved as the pressure increased." When the weekend concluded, Sarah had not only completed every challenge successfully but had demonstrated leadership qualities that exceeded those of candidates who had been training for months. The other participants, who had started the weekend as skeptics, became some of her strongest advocates. By Sunday evening, we weren't thinking of Sarah as the woman who was trying to break into our boys' club, Marcus Thompson explained. "We were thinking of her as the person we'd most want watching our backs in a real combat situation." Commander Hayes was impressed, but cautious. Sarah's performance had been exceptional, but the SEAL program was about more than just individual excellence. It required the ability to integrate into existing teams and maintain performance over years, not just a single weekend. The decision to accept Sarah into the SEAL training pipeline wasn't made immediately. For 3 weeks, Sarah waited while military leadership debated her case at the highest levels. Some officials were concerned about the precedent her acceptance would set. Others worried about the media attention that would inevitably follow the first woman in SEAL training. During this waiting period, Sarah continued her training routine, but also spent time preparing for the possibility of another rejection. She had learned that her sense of worth and purpose couldn't depend entirely on external validation, even from organizations she deeply respected. "I realized that regardless of what the SEALs decided, I had already accomplished something significant," Sarah reflected. "I had proven to myself that I could set an impossible goal and achieve it through dedication and smart preparation. That knowledge would serve me well no matter what path my life took next." The call came on a Thursday afternoon. Commander Hayes' voice was formal but warm as she delivered the news that would change Sarah's life forever. "Congratulations, Martinez. You've been accepted into basic underwater demolition/SEAL training. Class starts in 6 weeks. I hope you're ready for the real challenge to begin." Sarah felt a moment of pure joy followed immediately by a familiar determination. This acceptance wasn't the end of her journey. It was the beginning of an even greater challenge. But she was ready for it. That evening, Sarah called everyone who had supported her during the previous 18 months. Mrs. Chun cried with happiness. Dr. Torres expressed pride in Sarah's mental preparation. Maria Santos promised to celebrate with a special dinner. Tom Rodriguez offered to continue training with her during breaks from SEAL school. As Sarah sat in her apartment that night, surrounded by the training charts and motivational photos that had sustained her through the darkest moments of doubt, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. The rejection letters were still pinned to her bulletin board, but now they looked like stepping stones rather than obstacles. The journey ahead would be more difficult than anything she had already endured. SEAL training was designed to break even the most prepared candidates. But Sarah Martinez was no longer the same person who had been devastated by rejection letters. She had become someone who turned obstacles into opportunities and setbacks into comebacks. She had reached her breaking point and discovered that it wasn't an ending, it was a transformation. Now she was ready to rise above every challenge that lay ahead, not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been told that their dreams were impossible. The SEALs were about to discover what Sarah had learned during her 18 months of preparation, that the most dangerous person in any challenge isn't the one who's naturally gifted, but the one who refuses to accept limitations as permanent and keeps improving until they become undeniable. Sarah's story was no longer about proving she belonged with the elite. It was about showing them what elite really meant.